Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UCS horizon, watching the endless black of space through the main view screen. 6 months they had been traveling through uncharted territory, farther from Earth than any human had ever gone before. The ship hummed quietly around him, its crew of 200 going about their daily work with practiced efficiency. "Captain, we're approaching the Kepler 442 system," announced Navigation Officer Susan Bell from her station. Her voice carried a note of excitement that matched what Morrison felt in his chest. This was why they had come so far from home. To explore, to discover, to find what waited for humanity among the stars. Dr. Lisa Grant looked up from her science console, pushing a strand of brown hair from her face. She had been studying the sensor readings for weeks now, growing more excited with each passing day. "Jake, you need to see this. The long-range scanners are picking up clear signs of advanced technology in the system. We're talking about structures that could only be built by a spacefaring civilization." Morrison walked over to her station, studying the data scrolling across her screen. The readings showed massive artificial constructs orbiting the system's 4th planet, along with energy signatures that suggested a highly advanced technological base. After months of empty space and dead worlds, they had finally found what they were looking for. "Any signs of communication attempts?" Morrison asked. "Nothing directed at us," Grant replied. "But there's definitely organized signal traffic throughout the system. Multiple sources, coordinated patterns. This isn't random. Noise, Jake, this is a functioning civilization." Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez joined them at the science station, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. He had been working on the ship's main engines, keeping them running smoothly through the long journey. "How big are we talking about, Doc? Are we looking at a few outposts or something major?" Grant pulled up a tactical display showing the system layout. "Major doesn't begin to cover it. Based on the energy outputs and the size of those orbital structures, we're looking at a civilization that makes Earth's space program look like we're still throwing rocks." Morrison felt a mixture of excitement and caution. First contact with an alien civilization was the dream of every explorer, but it also carried enormous risks. Humanity's first encounter with another intelligent species would set the tone for everything that followed. "All right, people. This is what we came here for. But we do this by the book. No unnecessary risks, no sudden moves. We approach slowly, broadcast our peaceful intentions, and see how they respond." The bridge crew nodded their understanding. They had drilled for this scenario countless times during the journey, but the reality felt different. This wasn't a simulation or a training exercise. This was history in the making. "Susan, take us into the outer system at quarter impulse. Lisa, keep scanning for any changes in their activity patterns. Carlos, I want our engines ready for emergency power if we need to leave quickly." The horizon moved deeper into the Kepler 442 system, its sensors recording everything they encountered. The artificial structures became clearer on the displays, revealing a level of engineering that impressed even the experienced crew. Massive orbital platforms surrounded the 4th planet, connected by what appeared to be transport tubes stretching across thousands of kilometers of space. "Captain," said Communications Officer Kevin Walsh from his station, "I'm detecting movement. Multiple large objects are changing course and heading in our direction." Morrison's stomach tightened. "Speed and distance? They're fast, sir. Much faster than anything we can manage. At their current speed, they'll intercept us in approximately 2 hours. Grant worked frantically at her console, trying to gather as much information as possible about the approaching vessels. "Jake, these aren't exploration ships. The energy signatures suggest heavy weapons and defensive systems. These are warships." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Their first contact scenario was rapidly becoming something much more dangerous. Morrison had hoped for curious scientists or cautious diplomats. Instead, they appeared to be facing a military response. "Kevin, prepare a standard first contact message. Broadcast on all frequencies. Make it clear we come in peace and seek only communication and understanding." Walsh's fingers flew over his console, crafting the message that might determine whether humanity's first contact would be peaceful or hostile. The transmission went out across space, carrying humanity's hopes and intentions toward the approaching alien fleet. Minutes passed without response. The alien ships continued their approach, their speed and trajectory unchanged. If anything, they seemed to be accelerating. "Still no response to our communications," Walsh reported. "But Captain, I'm picking up signal traffic between their ships. It's encrypted, but the patterns suggest active coordination." Dr. Rachel Stone, the ship's medical officer, arrived on the bridge looking concerned. Word had spread quickly through the ship about their situation, and the crew was beginning to show signs of stress. "Jake, how bad is this looking?" Morrison kept his voice steady, not wanting to alarm his crew more than necessary. "We don't know yet, Rachel. We're dealing with an unknown civilization with unknown intentions. We'll handle whatever comes." The alien fleet grew larger on the tactical display, and with each passing minute, their true size became more apparent. The ships were massive, each one dwarfing the horizon by a factor of 3 or more. Their design was aggressive, with sharp angles and weapon ports clearly visible along their hulls. "Captain," Grant said quietly, her voice tight with worry, "I'm getting detailed scans of their ships now. The armor plating is incredibly thick, and those weapon systems... Jake, each of those ships could probably destroy us with a single salvo." "Lieutenant." Commander Amy Foster, the ship's Marine commander, entered the bridge with several of her security team. She had been conducting emergency drills throughout the ship, preparing the crew for various scenarios. "Sir, the ship is ready for whatever comes, but if those are warships..." "I know, Amy. Get your people to defensive positions, but keep them out of sight. I don't want to appear threatening if there's still a chance for peaceful contact." The alien fleet was now close enough for visual contact. The main screen displayed the approaching vessels in stark detail, and what the crew saw made their blood run cold. These weren't exploration ships or even military vessels designed for defense. These were hunters. The ships bristled with weapons, designed for capturing and disabling other vessels, not destroying them outright. "Captain," Walsh said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm receiving a transmission. It's not what we expected." The message came through the ship's speakers, translated by the computer into rough English. The voice was harsh and guttural, speaking with casual authority. "Soft flesh creatures in the small vessel. You have entered hunting grounds claimed by the Zephyrian fleet. You will prepare for boarding and capture. Resistance will result in damage to your breeding potential. Comply immediately." The bridge erupted in shocked murmurs. Morrison felt ice in his veins as the meaning became clear. These weren't representatives of a civilization seeking contact. They were predators, and they saw humans as prey. "They're treating us like animals," Foster said, her hand, instinctively, moving to her sidearm. Grant's face had gone pale as she processed the implications. "Jake, if they're treating this as a hunting expedition, then they've probably done this before. To other species, other civilizations." Morrison's mind raced through their options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped in a system controlled by hostile aliens who saw them not as potential allies or even enemies, but as livestock to be captured and processed. "Carlos, can we run?" Morrison asked. Rodriguez shook his head grimly. "Not a chance, Captain. They're faster than us and we're already too deep in the system. Even if we could reach the edge, they'd catch us long before we could jump to hyperspace." The alien fleet was now close enough that individual details could be seen on their hulls. Weapon ports were opening, and smaller vessels were detaching from the main ships, boarding craft designed for capturing prey alive. Morrison looked around at his crew, seeing fear in their eyes but also determination. These were good people, explorers and scientists who had volunteered for humanity's greatest adventure. They deserved better than to end up as trophies in some alien hunting lodge. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. "We are facing a hostile alien force that intends to capture us. This is not the first contact we hoped for, but it's the situation we're in. We will not surrender. We will not go quietly. If they want us, they'll have to fight for every inch of this ship." The crew's response came back immediately, not fear or panic, but determination and defiance. Humanity had come to the stars seeking knowledge and friendship. Instead, they had found predators who saw them as prey. The aliens were about to learn that humans had been prey before, long ago on Earth. But they had also been predators, and they had never forgotten how to fight when cornered. The hunt was about to begin, but the Zephyrians had made a critical error. They assumed they were the only predators in this system. They were wrong. The first boarding pod slammed into the Horizon's hull with a sound like thunder. Captain Jake Morrison felt the ship shake under the impact, followed immediately by 2 more hits on different sections. Emergency alarms wailed throughout the corridors as red lights bathed everything in an ominous glow. Hull breaches on decks 4, 7, and 9, reported Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez from his station. Emergency bulkheads are sealing, but they're cutting through the outer hull in 3 locations. Morrison gripped his command chair as another impact shook the ship. Through the main view screen, he could see more boarding pods launching from the alien vessels, their dark shapes racing toward the horizon like bullets. How long before they break through? Minutes, maybe less, Rodriguez replied, his fingers flying over his console as he tried to monitor the hull integrity from the bridge. These things are designed to cut through ship armor. Our hull won't stop them for long. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster was already moving toward the exit, her security team forming up behind her. She had spent years training for combat situations, but never anything like this. Captain, we need to get down there before they establish a foothold. If they control the breach points, they can flood the ship with boarders. Go, Morrison ordered. But Amy, remember what they said. They want us alive. Use that against them. Foster nodded and led her team toward the nearest lift. As the doors closed behind them, Morrison turned to Dr. Lisa Grant, who was working frantically at her science station. What can you tell me about these things? Not much yet, Grant replied, her voice tight with concentration. But Jake, look at this. She brought up a scan of one of the boarding pods on the main screen. These aren't military assault craft. Look at the interior layout. Those are containment cells, not troop compartments. The image showed the inside of an alien boarding pod, and what Morrison saw made his blood run cold. The craft was fitted with cage-like structures and restraint systems clearly designed for holding living prisoners. This wasn't an invasion. It was a capture operation. They've done this before, Morrison said quietly. Probably many times. Dr. Rachel Stone appeared on the bridge, having left her medical bay to help coordinate the defense. Jake, I've got crew members reporting strange sounds from inside the walls. Cutting, drilling, something moving through the maintenance shafts. They're not just coming through the main breaches, Morrison realized. Kevin, are you picking up any communication between their boarding parties? Communications Officer Kevin Walsh nodded, his face pale with concentration. Short burst encrypted, but the pattern suggests coordination between multiple teams. Captain, I think they're surrounding us. The ship shuddered again as another boarding pod attached itself to the hull. Morrison could hear the distant sound of metal being cut, the screech of alien tools tearing through the barriers that separated his crew from the hunters who wanted to capture them. All decks, this is the captain, Morrison announced over the ship's communication system. The enemy is boarding us in multiple locations. Remember your emergency protocols. Stay in groups, watch each other's backs, and don't let them separate. These things want us alive, which means we have advantages they don't expect. Down on deck 4, Foster and her security team reached the first breach point just as the aliens broke through. The emergency bulkhead exploded inward, and through the smoking hole came creatures that looked like nightmares made real. The Zephyrians stood 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in natural armor plating that gleamed like metal in the emergency lighting. Their heads were elongated, with rows of sharp teeth visible in their open mouths. But it was their claws that drew Foster's attention, razor-sharp talons that could tear through metal as easily as flesh. The lead Zephyrian stepped through the breach, its reptilian eyes scanning the corridor with predatory confidence. It carried a weapon that looked more like a net launcher than a gun, designed to capture rather than kill. Behind it came 3 more aliens, each one moving with the casual confidence of predators who had never faced real resistance. Foster and her team opened fire from their positions behind emergency barriers. The bullets struck the aliens but barely penetrated their natural armor. The Zephyrians looked surprised for a moment, then began advancing down the corridor with what sounded like laughter. Soft flesh shows claws, the lead alien said in broken English, its voice a harsh growl. Good. Makes hunt more interesting. But Foster had expected their weapons to be less effective against armored opponents. She signaled to her team, and they began falling back through the ship's corridors using their knowledge of the layout to their advantage. The Zephyrians followed, confident in their superiority. The aliens walked directly into the first trap. Foster had positioned crew members in the maintenance tunnels above the corridor, and as the Zephyrians passed underneath, the humans dropped improvised explosives made from the ship's engineering supplies. The blasts caught the aliens by surprise, sending them crashing to the deck. They're not used to prey that fights back intelligently, Foster reported over her communicator as her team moved to their next position. They expect us to run in terror, not set traps. On Deck 7, Security Chief Tony Martinez was dealing with his own group of boarders. But instead of meeting them head-on, he had evacuated the entire section and sealed it off. The Zephyrians found themselves in empty corridors, searching for prey that had simply vanished. Martinez watched them through the ship's internal cameras, studying their behavior. The aliens moved in a loose formation, clearly expecting to find terrified humans hiding in corners. They showed no tactical discipline, no awareness that they might be walking into an ambush. "Kevin," Martinez called over the communicator, "can you control the environmental systems in Section 7? "Give me a minute," Walsh replied from the bridge. "What do you need?" "Kill the lights and pump some of that emergency fog into the corridors. Let's see how these hunters do when they can't see their prey." The section plunged into darkness, filled with thick white fog from the ship's fire suppression system. The Zephyrians began making harsh sounds that might have been their version of cursing, stumbling through the corridors as they tried to navigate by sound and smell. Martinez and his team moved through the maintenance tunnels, using their knowledge of the ship to position themselves above the confused aliens. They dropped down behind the Zephyrians, using stun weapons and improvised clubs to attack from unexpected angles. The aliens were strong and tough, but they were also confused and disoriented. For the first time in their lives, they were experiencing what it felt like to be hunted. Back on the bridge, Morrison was coordinating the defense while trying to understand their enemy. Dr. Grant had been analyzing the aliens' communication, signals and behavioral patterns, looking for weaknesses they could exploit. "Jake, I think I'm starting to understand how their society works," Grant said, looking up from her console. "Their communication patterns suggest a rigid hierarchy based on dominance and submission. They've never encountered a species that fights back effectively." "What does that mean for us?" Morrison asked. "It means they're psychologically unprepared for this kind of resistance. Their entire worldview is based on being the top predator. When prey starts acting like predators, it creates confusion in their decision-making process." Dr. Stone had been monitoring the medical situation throughout the ship. "Jake, we've got wounded crew members, but nothing critical yet. More importantly, I've been studying the biological samples we're getting from the fights. These aliens have some interesting vulnerabilities, such as their armor is tough, but it's also heavy. They're built for intimidation and brief, violent encounters. In a prolonged fight, they'll start to tire faster than humans. Also, their enhanced metabolism requires a lot of energy. If we can keep them running around the ship, they'll wear down." Morrison began to see a strategy forming. The Zephyrians expected a quick hunt followed by easy capture of terrified prey. Instead, they were facing organized resistance that was drawing them deeper into the ship, further from their support vessels. "All teams, this is the captain," Morrison announced. "New strategy. Don't try to stop them from boarding. Let them come aboard, then make this ship a maze they can't escape from. Use the maintenance tunnels, the cargo bays, every system on the ship. Make them work for every meter they advance." Throughout the horizon, the human crew began implementing Morrison's new strategy. Instead of defending fixed positions, they turned the entire ship into a hunting ground with themselves as the hunters and the Zephyrians as the prey. Foster led her aliens through a series of corridors that seemed to lead toward the ship's main power core, but actually led to a dead end in the cargo bay. When the Zephyrians realized they had been led into a trap, they found themselves surrounded by humans who had positioned themselves in the upper loading platforms. The aliens looked up at their prey, expecting to see fear. Instead, they saw humans, with improvised weapons, homemade explosives, and the cold determination of people fighting for their lives. "Still think we're easy prey?" Foster called down to them. The lead Zephyrian snarled something in its own language, then spoke in broken English. "Soft flesh tricks will not save you. We are hunters. You are food." Captain Jake Morrison stood in the ship's main engineering bay, watching Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez work frantically at the power distribution console. The horizon shuddered around them as another group of Zephyrian boarding pods attached to the hull. But Morrison's attention was focused on a different kind of battle, the one for control of his ship's systems. "How much power can you give me, Carlos?" Morrison asked. Rodriguez wiped sweat from his forehead, his hands never stopping their work on the complex controls. "I can reroute power from life support in the sections we've already evacuated. That should give us enough juice to overload the communications array for about 10 minutes, but Jake, if this doesn't work, we'll be flying blind." Morrison nodded grimly. The plan was risky, but they were running out of options. The Zephyrians were learning from their mistakes, adapting their tactics to counter human resistance. If humanity was going to survive this encounter, they needed to stop being reactive and start taking the initiative. "Do it," Morrison ordered. Throughout the ship, the lights dimmed as Rodriguez diverted power from non-essential systems. In the communications center, Kevin Walsh worked alongside Dr. Lisa Grant to modify the ship's main transmitter into something the aliens had never encountered before, a weapon designed to attack their minds rather than their bodies. "Based on my analysis of their communication patterns," Grant explained as she adjusted the signal frequency, "Zephyrian hearing is much more sensitive than human hearing. They use sound for hunting, territory marking, and social dominance. If we can overload their auditory systems, we turn their greatest strength into a weakness." Walsh finished, his fingers dancing over the controls. "I'm linking this to the ship's internal communication system too. Every speaker on the horizon is about to become a weapon." Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster's voice crackled over the communicator from Deck 6, where she was leading a running battle with a group of Zephyrian boarders. "Captain, whatever you're planning, you'd better do it fast. These things are getting smarter. They're starting to coordinate their attacks better." Morrison could hear the sound of weapons fire in the background of Foster's transmission. His people were fighting brilliantly, but they were still outnumbered and outgunned. The Zephyrians' natural armor made them difficult to injure with standard weapons, and their superior strength gave them an advantage in close combat. "Amy, in 60 seconds, tell your people to cover their ears and find the nearest sealed compartment," Morrison ordered. "We're about to make some noise." Dr. Rachel Stone appeared at Morrison's shoulder, carrying a medical kit and looking concerned.
"Jake, I've been treating wounded crew members from the boarding fights. We're holding our own, but barely. These aliens are tough and they heal fast."
"If we don't find a way to end this soon." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Morrison could see the exhaustion on his crew's faces, hear it in their voices over the communicators. Humans were adaptable and clever, but they weren't built for the kind of prolonged physical combat that came naturally to the Zephyrians. 30 seconds, Walsh announced. Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system. "All hands, this is the captain. In 20 seconds, we're going to hit our uninvited guests with something they've never experienced before. Find cover, seal your compartments, and protect your hearing. This is about to get loud." Throughout the horizon, human crew members scrambled for protected positions. In the corridors where fighting was still ongoing, Foster and her teams dove into maintenance alcoves and emergency shelters, pulling blast doors closed behind them. The Zephyrians, scattered throughout the ship in their hunting parties, continued their search for human prey. They had no idea what was coming. "Signal ready," Grant reported. Frequency locked on their communication patterns. "Do it," Morrison ordered. The horizon's communication array erupted with a sound unlike anything heard before in space. It was the combined noise of every alarm, siren, and emergency signal in human technology, amplified and focused into a devastating acoustic assault. The sound traveled through the ship's hull, its corridors, and its atmosphere, seeking out sensitive Zephyrian hearing. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the ship, Zephyrian boarders dropped their weapons and clutched their heads, their mouths open in silent screams of agony. The sound that humans found merely unpleasant was pure torture to aliens who used their enhanced hearing as a primary sense. Several Zephyrians collapsed completely, writhing on the deck as their nervous systems were overloaded by input they had never evolved to handle. Others stumbled blindly through corridors, their coordination destroyed by the auditory assault. "It's working," Foster reported over the communicator, her voice barely audible over the continuing sound. "The aliens are down. They're not moving coherently." But Morrison's attention was already focused on the next phase of his plan. Through the main view screen in engineering, he could see the Zephyrian fleet holding position around the horizon. The alien ships were maintaining their distance, confident that their boarding parties would complete the capture operation. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Kevin, can you boost the signal to reach their ships?" Morrison asked. Walsh checked his readings and shook his head. "Not at this distance, Captain. The signal degrades too much in vacuum. We'd need to be much closer." Morrison looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the alien vessels. One of them, a medium-sized ship that appeared to be a command vessel, was positioned relatively close to the horizon. If they could reach it— "Carlos, how much power do we have left in the engines?" Morrison asked. Rodriguez checked his console, his expression growing worried. "Enough for basic maneuvering, but Jake, what are you thinking? We can't outrun their ships." "We don't need to outrun them," Morrison replied. "We need to get close enough to one of them to make this work. And then we need to get aboard." The bridge crew stared at him as if he had lost his mind. The idea of humans boarding an alien warship seemed impossible, but Morrison could see the logic of it. The Zephyrians had made this personal when they decided to hunt his crew. It was time to return the favor. "Captain," Dr. Stone said carefully, "that's incredibly dangerous. We don't know anything about the interior of their ships, their security systems, their crew size. We know they're not expecting it." Morrison interrupted. "These are hunters who have been doing the same thing for probably centuries. They board other ships, they capture the crews, they process them. But they've never had their own ships boarded by their intended prey." Grant looked up from her analysis console, her eyes bright with sudden understanding. "Jake, it might actually work. Based on their communication patterns and ship movements, their entire tactical doctrine is built around being the aggressor. They probably have minimal internal security because they've never needed it." Security Chief Tony Martinez's voice came over the communicator from Deck 9, where he had been coordinating the defense against another boarding party. "Captain, the acoustic weapon worked perfectly. We've got unconscious aliens scattered throughout the ship, but sir, their main fleet is starting to move. I think they know something went wrong." Morrison could see it on the tactical display. The Zephyrian ships were breaking their holding pattern, moving closer to investigate why their boarding parties had stopped reporting. They would discover the truth soon enough, and when they did, they might decide to abandon the capture operation. "In favor of simply destroying the horizon? Carlos, I need you to get the engines online for emergency power. Kevin, prepare another acoustic burst, but this time focus it into a tight beam we can use as a weapon. Amy, I need a boarding party of volunteers who are willing to take the fight to the enemy." The crew exchanged glances, and Morrison could see the fear in their eyes, but he could also see something else: determination, anger, and the kind of stubborn courage that had carried humans from caves to starships. "Sir," Foster said over the communicator, "how many volunteers do you need?" "As many as are willing," Morrison replied. "But understand what we're asking. We're going to board an alien warship in the middle of their fleet with no backup and no way out except victory." The response came back immediately, not just from Foster but from crew members throughout the ship. Engineers, scientists, medical personnel, security officers, people who had signed up for exploration and discovery but were willing to fight when their survival was at stake. "All right, people," Morrison said, feeling a surge of pride in his crew. "Let's show these hunters what happens when they mistake humans for prey." The Horizon's engines came online with a surge of power that Rodriguez had somehow coaxed from the damaged systems. The ship began moving toward the nearest Zephyrian vessel, a maneuver so unexpected that the alien fleet hesitated for crucial seconds. In those seconds, Morrison saw their chance. The Zephyrians had spent so long as unchallenged predators that they had forgotten the most important rule of hunting. Sometimes, the prey fights back. The command ship they were approaching was sleek and deadly, bristling with weapons designed for disabling other vessels. But those weapons were designed to capture, not to defend against a desperate boarding action by prey that refused to stay captured. The horizon shuddered as it slammed into the docking port of the Zephyrian command ship. Captain Jake Morrison felt the impact through the deck plates, followed by the grinding sound of metal against metal, as Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez forced the airlocks to connect. It was not a gentle docking. It was an assault. Seal achieved, Rodriguez reported from his portable engineering station. But Jake, I don't know how long it will hold. Their ship's automated systems are trying to reject the connection. Morrison stood with his boarding party in the Horizon's main airlock, looking at the sealed door that separated them from the alien vessel beyond. 20 volunteers had stepped forward for this mission, including Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster, Security Chief Tony Martinez, Dr. Lisa Grant, and surprisingly, Dr. Rachel Stone, who insisted that someone with medical training needed to come along to treat wounded team members. Remember the plan, Morrison said quietly, checking his improvised weapon one last time. We get in fast, we hit their command center, and we disable their ship's ability to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. These aliens have never faced a boarding action before, so they won't be prepared for this. Foster adjusted the portable, acoustic weapon that Kevin Walsh had built for them, a smaller version of the device that had disabled the Zephyrian boarders on the horizon. Sir, what if their ship has different atmospheric conditions? What if we can't breathe in there? Then we hold our breath and work fast, Morrison replied grimly. Carlos, open the door. The airlock cycled open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Beyond it lay a corridor unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The walls were dark metal covered in patterns that might have been decorative or functional, and the lighting was a dim red that cast everything in an ominous glow. The air was thick and humid, carrying scents that reminded Morrison unpleasantly of reptiles and decay. But what struck him most was the silence. There were no alarm sounds, no emergency lighting, no signs that the ship's crew knew they had been boarded. The Zephyrians had never needed internal security systems because nothing had ever threatened them on their own ships. Stay together, Morrison whispered as the boarding party moved into the alien corridor. Watch for movement and remember, they might be stronger than us, but we're smarter. The corridor stretched in both directions, curving away into darkness. Dr. Grant pulled out a portable scanner, trying to map the ship's layout and locate the command center. The device worked slowly in the alien environment, struggling to interpret construction materials and energy patterns it had never encountered before. This way, Grant whispered, pointing down the left corridor. I'm reading higher energy concentrations in that direction. Could be their main computer systems. The boarding party moved through the Zephyrian ship like ghosts, their soft-soled boots making almost no sound on the alien deck plates. The corridors were larger than those on human ships, built for creatures 8 feet tall with proportionally broad shoulders. Everything about the design spoke of power and dominance. They had traveled perhaps 50 meters when they encountered their first Zephyrian crew member. The alien was walking down the corridor toward them, its attention focused on a device in its clawed hands. It looked up just as Morrison's team rounded a corner, and for a moment both sides stared at each other in shock. The Zephyrian recovered first, opening its mouth to roar in alarm. But Foster was faster, activating the portable acoustic weapon. At point-blank range, the alien's roar turned into a shriek of pain as it collapsed to the deck, clutching its head. Move, Morrison ordered. That noise will bring others. They dragged the unconscious alien into a side chamber and continued deeper into the ship. Behind them, Morrison could hear sounds of movement as other crew members began responding to the disturbance, but the sounds were confused, disorganized. The Zephyrians had no protocols for dealing with intruders on their own vessels. Grant's scanner began picking up stronger signals as they approached what appeared to be the ship's central section. Jake, I'm reading massive computer arrays just ahead. This has to be their command center. The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with alien technology. Screens and control panels covered the walls, displaying information in symbols that meant nothing to human eyes. But the basic layout was familiar enough. This was clearly the brain of the ship, the place where decisions were made and orders were given, and it was defended by 6 Zephyrian crew members who turned toward the human boarding party with expressions of shock and rage. "Impossible," one of them snarled in broken English. "Prey does not board predator ships. Prey runs and hides." Morrison stepped forward, raising his weapon. "We're not prey. We're humans. And you made a big mistake when you decided to hunt us." The Zephyrians charged across the command center, their claws extended and their mouths open in threatening roars. They were faster and stronger than humans, but they were also predictable. They had spent their entire lives as unquestioned predators, and they attacked like animals that had never faced organized resistance. Foster and Martinez split left and right, using the alien control consoles as cover while they fired at the charging Zephyrians. Their bullets struck the aliens' natural armor, slowing them down but not stopping them completely. But the humans weren't trying to win through firepower alone. Dr. Stone activated a second acoustic weapon, filling the command center with the devastating sound that could cripple Zephyrian hearing. 3 of the aliens stumbled and fell, their coordination destroyed by the auditory assault. The remaining 3 continued their charge, but they were disoriented and clumsy. Morrison met the lead Zephyrian head-on, ducking under its clawed swipe, and striking at its legs with an improvised club made from ship components. The alien was stronger, but Morrison was faster and more agile. He rolled away from its counterattack and came up behind it, striking at the base of its skull where Grant had identified a potential weak point. Around the command center, the rest of the boarding party fought with the desperation of people who knew there was no retreat. Martinez used his security training to grapple with one of the aliens using leverage and technique to overcome the creature's superior strength. Foster coordinated covering fire to keep the aliens from using their natural teamwork instincts, but it was Dr. Grant who provided the crucial advantage. While the others fought, she worked frantically at one of the alien control stations, her portable scanner helping her interpret the strange symbols and energy patterns. She had spent years studying alien technology, and even these unfamiliar systems followed certain logical principles. "Jake," she called out over the sound of combat, "I think I can access their communication systems. If I can send a signal to their fleet, do it," Morrison replied, dodging another claw swipe from his opponent. Grant's fingers worked over the alien controls, adapting human understanding to alien technology. The acoustic weapon that had disabled the Zephyrians on the horizon had been designed for human ships with human communication systems, but if she could modify it for Zephyrian technology, the command center's main screen flickered and changed, displaying new information as Grant gained access to the ship's central computer. She could see the positions of the entire Zephyrian fleet, their communication frequencies, even their tactical plans for processing human prisoners. "Got it," Grant announced. "Jake, I can broadcast our acoustic weapon through their entire fleet communication network. Every ship, every crew member, all at once." Morrison struck his opponent again, finally bringing the large alien down. Around the command center, the last of the Zephyrian defenders were falling to human weapons and tactics. "What's the range?" "The entire fleet," Grant replied, her voice filled with excitement and fear. "But Jake, if I do this, it's going to disable every Zephyrian in the system. Their ships will be powerless, their crews incapacitated. We'll be alone in alien space with no way to negotiate." Morrison looked around at his boarding party. They were all wounded, exhausted, running on adrenaline and determination, but they were alive, and they had accomplished something that the Zephyrians had thought impossible. They had turned the hunt around. "These things wanted to hunt us for sport," Morrison said. "They saw us as animals to be captured and processed. They've probably done this to dozens of other species. How many civilizations have they destroyed? How many people have they killed?" Dr. Stone looked up from treating a wounded team member. Jake, if we disable their entire fleet, we'll have access to their ships, their technology, their star charts. We could learn everything about their operations. Martinez wiped blood from a claw wound on his arm. Sir, these aliens have been terrorizing this part of space for who knows how long. Maybe it's time someone stopped them. Morrison made his decision. Lisa, do it. Send the signal. Grant's hands moved over the alien controls, adapting the acoustic weapon for broadcast through the Zephyrian Fleet Communication Network. On the command center's screens, they could see the signal propagating through space, reaching ship after ship in the alien fleet. The effect was immediate and devastating. Throughout the Zephyrian fleet, crew members collapsed as their enhanced hearing was overwhelmed by the acoustic assault. Ships began drifting out of formation as their pilots and navigators were incapacitated. 6 months after the battle at Kepler 442, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the captured Zephyrian command ship, now renamed the UCS Liberation. The alien vessel had been modified with human technology and staffed with volunteers from Earth's expanding fleet. Around him, dozens of other captured Zephyrian ships moved through space in perfect formation, their predatory designs now serving a very different purpose. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the surface, reported Communications Officer Kevin Walsh from his station. The former crew of the Horizon had become the core leadership of humanity's new liberation fleet, their experience fighting the Zephyrians making them invaluable in the ongoing campaign. Morrison nodded toward the main view screen, which displayed the fourth planet in the Vega system. 2 weeks ago, this world had been a Zephyrian processing center, where captured members of dozens of alien species were held as breeding stock for future hunts. Today it was free, its liberation facilities dismantled and its former prisoners beginning the long journey back to their home worlds. Put it through, Morrison ordered. The screen flickered and displayed the face of Dr. Lisa Grant, who was leading the humanitarian mission on the planet's surface. Behind her, Morrison could see representatives of species humanity had never encountered before, some reptilian, others mammalian, a few that seemed to be based on entirely different biological principles. All of them had one thing in common. They were alive and free because humans had decided to hunt the hunters. Jake, the evacuation is proceeding ahead of schedule, Grant reported. We've located another 300 prisoners in the southern facility, including what appears to be the last surviving members of a species called the Cathara. According to the records, the Zephyrians thought they had hunted them to extinction 50 years ago. Morrison felt a familiar surge of anger at the casual brutality of Zephyrian record-keeping. The aliens had documented their genocidal activities with the same attention to detail that human scientists use to catalog research specimens. The difference was that every entry represented entire civilizations destroyed for sport. Any word on the technical salvage? Morrison asked. Dr. Rachel Stone appeared beside Grant on the screen, her medical training having proven invaluable in treating the various alien species they had rescued. We've recovered their entire database of hunting grounds and processing facilities. Jake, the scope of this operation is even larger than we thought. They have installations in over 40 systems, some of them processing centers like this one, others breeding facilities for species they keep as livestock. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster's voice came over the ship's communication system from the flight deck. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up movement in the outer system. 3 Zephyrian vessels, heavy cruiser class, approaching from the Yo direction of their home territory. Morrison felt his crew tense around him. Over the past 6 months, they had liberated 17 Zephyrian facilities and captured or destroyed over 60 alien ships. But each victory brought them closer to the heart of Zephyrian space, where the aliens' most powerful fleets were based. Time to intercept? Morrison asked. 4 hours at their current speed, Foster replied. But Jake, these aren't hunting ships. These are military vessels designed for ship-to-ship combat, rather than capturing prey. Chief Engineer Carlos Rodriguez looked up from his station, where he had been monitoring the fusion of human and Zephyrian technology that powered their captured fleet. Captain, the Liberation and her escort ships are ready for combat. But if they're sending military units, it means the Zephyrian High Command is finally taking us seriously. Morrison walked to the tactical display that showed the positions of his fleet and the approaching Zephyrian vessels. Humanity now controlled over 30 captured alien ships, each one crewed by volunteers from Earth's rapidly expanding Space Force. But they were still operating deep in enemy territory, far from any support. "Kevin, open a channel to all ships in the fleet," Morrison ordered. The communication system activated, connecting Morrison to the captains and crews of the Liberation Fleet. These were men and women who had volunteered for humanity's most dangerous mission, hunting down the hunters who had terrorized the galaxy for over 1,000 years. "All ships, this is Morrison. We have incoming Zephyrian military vessels, estimated time to contact 4 hours. This is what we've been preparing for. These aren't hunting ships designed to capture prey. These are warships built to destroy other vessels. But they're still Zephyrians, and they still think like predators who have never faced real resistance." Morrison paused, looking around at his bridge crew. These people had been with him since the beginning, since that first terrifying encounter when they thought they were going to die as captured prey. Now they were the spearhead of humanity's expansion into the galaxy, liberating worlds and freeing species that had been enslaved for generations. "Remember what we learned at Kepler 442, Morrison continued. "Zephyrians are psychologically unprepared for prey that fights back. They expect fear, submission, and easy victory. What they're going to get is coordinated human tactics, superior strategy, and the kind of stubborn determination that brought us from Earth to the stars." The response from the fleet was immediate and unanimous. Ship after ship reported ready for battle, their crews eager to face the aliens who had once seen them as nothing more than livestock. Security Chief Tony Martinez appeared on the bridge, carrying a datapad with intelligence reports from their captured Zephyrian databases. "Captain, I've been analyzing their military doctrine. These warships operate on the same predator pack mentality as their hunting fleets. They expect to intimidate their opponents into surrender, then close for the kill, which means they'll be vulnerable to coordinated defensive tactics," Morrison replied. "Amy, deploy the fleet in formation Delta 7. I want those ships to think they're facing scattered prey, then hit them from all sides when they close to attack range." Over the next 4 hours, Morrison's fleet prepared for the battle that would determine whether humanity's liberation campaign could continue. Dr. Grant and her team evacuated the remaining prisoners from the planet's surface, loading them onto transport vessels that would carry them toward the edge of Zephyrian space. Dr. Stone coordinated medical preparations for the casualties they expected to take, but it was the psychological preparation that mattered most. For 6 months, humans had been proving that they were more than just clever prey. They had become hunters themselves, tracking down Zephyrian facilities across multiple star systems and freeing the species that had been enslaved by alien predators. When the Zephyrian warships finally arrived, they found what appeared to be a small group of human vessels clustered around the liberated planet. The alien ships moved in for the attack with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat, their crews expecting another easy victory against inferior prey. They discovered their error when Morrison's fleet revealed itself. The human ships had been hiding in the planet's magnetic field, using technology adapted from captured Zephyrian stealth systems. As the alien warships closed to attack range, they suddenly found themselves surrounded by 30 vessels crewed by humans who had learned to think like predators. The battle was fierce but brief. The Zephyrian ships were powerful and well-armed, but their crews were not prepared for the kind of coordinated tactics that humans had developed. Where the aliens expected individual combat between predator and prey, they found themselves facing a pack of hunters who worked together with deadly efficiency. Morrison watched from the Liberation's bridge as the last Zephyrian warship was disabled and boarded. Around him, his crew worked with the quiet competence of people who had learned to turn impossible situations into victories. "Captain," Walsh reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining Zephyrian crew members. They're requesting terms." Morrison considered this for a moment. The Zephyrians had never offered terms to their prey, never shown mercy to the species they hunted. But humanity could choose to be better than their enemies. "Tell them they'll be treated according to the same standards they showed their prisoners," Morrison replied. They'll be kept alive, fed, and given the opportunity to provide information about remaining Zephyrian facilities. But their hunting days are over. The victory at Vega was the turning point that Morrison had been hoping for. Word of the defeat spread through Zephyrian space faster than their ships could travel, carrying news that the unstoppable predators had finally met their match. Species that had lived in terror for generations began to hope for freedom. But more importantly, the battle demonstrated that humanity's expansion into the galaxy would not be stopped by alien predators. The crew of the Horizon had come to space, seeking peaceful contact with other civilizations. Instead, they had found monsters and been forced to become monster hunters. Standing on the bridge of his captured flagship, Morrison looked at the star chart showing the locations of remaining Zephyrian facilities. There were still worlds to liberate, species to free, and predators to hunt. The campaign that had started with a single human ship facing impossible odds had become a galactic liberation movement.